Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, December 18th, 2020. The FAIRtax, the vaccine for many of our problems. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines vaccine as a preparation of dead microorganisms, living attenuated organisms, or living fully virulent organisms that is administered to produce or artificially increase immunity to a particular disease. Now, while there have been some mixed reactions from people about the COVID-19 vaccines, there has been a noticeable sigh of relief on a global scale. There's now some glimmer of hope that we can return to a more normal life without masks, without social distancing, and without any more lockdowns and forced business closures. However, a more normal life will still have the income payroll tax system in it and all the problems that come with it. This antiquated, incomprehensible, and corrupt system has served to enrich and empower the ruling class in D.C. for over 100 years, but it's never worked well for the American taxpayer. The fact that we continue to tolerate it is nothing short of insane. Now, a law that's been in place for over 100 years will generally have its share of supporters and defenders. If there's a debate about repealing that law, its supporters can usually make a decent case for keeping it. Now, this is just not the case with the present income payroll tax system. Even among the economists, politicians, tax experts, and bureaucrats who support the income payroll tax, none have even tried to deny that under the FAIRtax, the economy will grow much faster. The tax system will no longer be subsidizing imports, punishing U.S. exports, and sending well-paying jobs overseas. With the FAIRtax, tax evasion will be greatly reduced. If you want to pay less taxes, then you just buy less or purchase used goods. The enormous compliance costs associated with the income tax will be reduced by close to 90%. Most lower and middle income Americans will have more money to spend on their families. They'll bring home their full paychecks with no federal withholding or payroll taxes, plus they'll get the FAIRtax prebate every month. With the FAIRtax, all individual income tax returns will be eliminated, and only those businesses engaged in retail sales will have to deal with collecting and remitting the FAIRtax. Under the FAIRtax, the IRS will be eliminated, and only a small department in the Treasury Department will be needed to audit the states to ensure that the proper amount of FAIRtax is being remitted to the Treasury. With the FAIRtax, Americans will no longer have to beg Congress and the bureaucrats to let them keep more of what they earn. The tax code will be stable. Individuals and businesses will no longer have to deal with a myriad of ever-changing tax laws that make long-term planning almost impossible. With the FAIRtax, the tax code will be easily understandable. No one will have to pay big fees for professional help with their taxes. The wealthy and the special interests will no longer be able to buy tax benefits that the rest of us have to pay for with higher taxes. And for the first time in over 100 years, Americans will finally see what the federal government is costing them because the amount of FAIRtax paid will be shown on every receipt. And finally, when the income tax is eliminated, the cost of doing business goes way down. In a competitive marketplace, when costs go down, retail prices follow. Now, while some of these economists, politicians, and bureaucrats don't fully agree with the exact wording of some of the points above, very few of them try to dispute the data. Now, why then would these groups not immediately join us in vigorously demanding that the FAIRtax replace the income tax? The answer is simple. These economists, politicians, and bureaucrats view the present income payroll tax system as essential to their income. When the FAIRtax is enacted, economists can no longer command large fees for writing papers and giving speeches about how to improve the tax system. Bureaucrats fear that losing the huge IRS bureaucracy will possibly threaten their jobs by sparking interest in investigating the size and activities of other bureaucracies. Tax experts will no longer receive enormous fees for helping businesses and individuals claw back some of the money that they paid in taxes. Politicians who are spending a good part of their day trying to raise funds can no longer extort large donations from special interest groups and tax lobbyists looking to buy favorable tax treatment. And politicians will also lose one of their most effective tools for gaining and maintaining control over our lives. They can no longer threaten our ability to plan and provide for our families by constantly threatening to confiscate more of our money and by constantly changing the income payroll tax system. Now, obviously, none of these people will openly reveal their real reason for supporting the income tax, but some will admit in private that the fair tax is definitely a superior system. They just don't want to see it enacted until after they retire. So what is their most commonly stated reason for opposing the fair tax? The fair tax is not fair, they say. What? Now, they know that the payroll tax is the most regressive tax of all, and that the income tax is only considered fair by people who are profiting from it, and not by anyone else. Now, no one likes taxes. No one likes to go to the dentist to get a cavity filled either. However, if you have to collect taxes, then it should be through a system that lets people get all of their money, and then they choose not only how much they pay in federal taxes, but also when they pay their taxes, and do it all in the simplest manner possible. Now, the fair tax is still a tax, but it's much fairer than the income payroll tax. These opponents know this, but their reasoning is clouded by their need to protect their own livelihoods, just like the buggy whip makers opposed the early automobiles. In conclusion, it's time to consider not only the COVID-19 vaccine, but also to look at a vaccine that can cure so many of our present problems, the fair tax. Now, the fair tax will not require an injection, just courage. Courage on Congress's part to pass it, and courage on the President's part to sign it. St. Augustine said, "Hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage." Now, anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain the way things are. Now, with respect to our current system of taxation, Americans need to clearly express our anger at the way things are and have the courage to see that they just don't remain that way. After the tumultuous election and all the uncertainty over what's going to come, a good friend of mine and board member of the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association sent me this quote taken from A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair." Greed and a desire to control people's lives are the only real reasons that anyone would oppose passing the fair tax. So, if you have friends who don't know about the fair tax, send them to fairtax.org. Have them watch the whiteboards under how it works, and then, if they agree, ask them to please join us. Then, contact your members of Congress and the President and demand that Congress pass the fair tax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org.